Neera's translucent fingers trembled as she pulled her tattered cloak tighter around her shoulders. The Earth's autumn wind felt harsh against her iridescent skin, so different from the warm breezes of her destroyed homeworld. Her luminescent purple eyes scanned the outskirts of New Denver, watching the gleaming towers pierce the night sky, while she huddled in the shadows of the abandoned industrial district. 3 days without sustenance. Her species could go longer without food than humans, but even she had limits. The nutrient pack she'd salvaged from her escape pod had run out last week, and her body was starting to shut down. The bioluminescent patterns that usually danced across her skin had grown dim, barely visible even in the darkness. She'd watched the humans from afar, learning their patterns, their behaviors. Their food looked strange to her, but her body's internal analyzer had confirmed she could digest most of it. The problem wasn't finding food. It was everywhere in this city of plenty. The problem was getting it without causing a panic. The last time she'd approached a human establishment, the screaming had started immediately. Alien. They'd shouted, reaching for weapons, calling their authorities. She'd barely escaped, and the wound from their projectile weapons still ached in her side. They didn't understand that she was a refugee, that her people had been peaceful scholars before the Krath invasion destroyed everything. Neera moved cautiously through the shadows, her feet making no sound on the cracked pavement. Ahead, the back door of a food distribution center stood propped open, steam rising from within. The scents made her dizzy with hunger. Her translator picked up fragments of conversation. Workers discussing leftover inventory, food that would be discarded. The thought of waste made her inner lights pulse with distress. On her world, nothing was wasted. Every resource was precious, shared, recycled. But here, abundance bred carelessness. She'd watch them throw away more food in a day than her family would eat in a month. A plan formed in her mind. She would wait until the last worker left, then search their waste receptacles. It wasn't dignified, but dignity meant little when survival was at stake. The hours crept by as workers slowly filtered out. Finally, only one vehicle remained in the small parking area. Neera crept closer, her movements silent and fluid despite her weakened state. Just as she reached the first waste container, the back door swung open. Light spilled out, along with the silhouette of a human male. She froze, her camouflage ability automatically shifting her skin to match the shadows, but she knew it was weakened by her hunger. The human paused, keys jingling in his hand. Something made him turn, looking directly at her hiding spot. She held her breath, knowing she should run but lacking the strength. Their eyes met across the darkness, her luminescent purple meeting his warm brown. For a moment, neither moved. Then his hand reached for the communication device at his belt, and Neera's heart sank. She gathered her remaining strength, preparing to flee, knowing she couldn't survive another encounter with their authorities. But instead of calling for help, the human slowly raised both hands, palms outward, in what she recognized as a peaceful gesture. "Wait," he said softly, and her translator hummed with the word. "You don't have to run. I've seen you before, watching. You're hungry, aren't you?" Neera remained frozen, every instinct screaming at her to flee, but something in his voice made her hesitate. He moved slowly, deliberately, reaching into the bag he carried and pulling out a wrapped package. The scent that wafted from it made her dizzy with need. "It's okay," he said, placing the package on the ground and stepping back. "Take it. There's more inside if you want it." Neera's mind raced. It could be a trap. Humans had proven untrustworthy before, but as she studied his face, she saw something she hadn't expected: compassion, understanding, the same qualities her people had valued above all else. She took a single step forward, then another, her natural bioluminescence betraying her presence as hunger overcame caution. The human remained still, watching but not threatening. As she reached for the package, her weakened legs finally gave out, and she collapsed to her knees. Instead of running or calling for help, the human moved forward to catch her. His hands were warm, steady, careful not to hurt her as he helped her sit. "My name is Marcus," he said quietly. "Let me help you. Please." And for the first time since her world burned, Nera felt something she'd thought lost forever. Hope. The fluorescent lights of the food bank's break room buzzed overhead as Nera cautiously ate the meal Marcus had provided. Her natural bioluminescence had already begun to strengthen, purple patterns rippling beneath her translucent skin with renewed energy. Marcus sat across from her, maintaining a respectful distance while she consumed the simple meal of bread, fruit, and protein. "The day shift starts in an hour," he explained softly, checking his watch. "We need to figure out somewhere safe for you to go." His kindness felt alien to her after weeks of hostility, but the wariness remained in her posture. A door slammed somewhere in the building, making Nera flinch. Heavy footsteps approached, and Marcus quickly stood. "Stay here," he whispered, moving to intercept whoever was coming. But he was too late. The break room door swung open, revealing an older woman in a security uniform. Her eyes widened at the sight of Nera, hand immediately going to her weapon. "Marcus, get away from that thing," she shouted, drawing her stunner. "Rita, wait." Marcus moved between them, hands raised. "She's not dangerous. She's a refugee. She's starving." "It's one of them," Rita snarled, her finger tightening on the trigger. "Did you forget what they did to Chicago? To Mumbai? Those were the craft." Marcus protested. "She's not." The stunner discharged with a crack of electricity. Marcus dove aside as Nera moved with unexpected speed despite her weakened state, her form blurring as she activated her camouflage. Rita fired again, but Nera was already through the door, running on pure instinct. She heard Marcus calling after her, but panic drove her forward. Through the corridors, past shocked early morning workers, out into the pre-dawn darkness. She ran until her legs gave out, collapsing in an alley several blocks away. As her breathing steadied, the reality of her situation crashed down upon her. She had found one human who showed kindness, only to have it ripped away by fear and prejudice. The food in her stomach felt like lead as she curled into herself, her bioluminescence dimming with despair. Hours passed. Nera dozed fitfully, her species' natural healing attempting to restore her strength. The sounds of the city grew around her, vehicles, voices, the pulse of human life continuing without awareness of her presence. She thought of Marcus, hoping he hadn't suffered consequences for helping her. A child's voice suddenly pierced her consciousness. "Mommy, look." Pretty lights. Nera's eyes snapped open. A small human child stood at the entrance to her alley, pointing at her dimly glowing form. The mother's reaction was immediate and predictable. "Get back." The woman grabbed her child, pulling out her communication device. "Security. Alien sighting in Sector 7. Nera pushed herself up, muscles protesting as she forced herself to move. But she was still weak, and this time there was nowhere to run. The alley opened onto a busy street, and she could already hear the approaching sirens. "Stop right there." The mechanical voice came from above. A security drone hovering over the alley's entrance, its weapons trained on her position. More drones appeared, forming a perimeter. Humans scattered from the street, leaving her trapped between the machines and the solid wall behind her. Her translator picked up their communications. Target contained. Retrieval team en route. Non-lethal force authorized. Nera pressed herself against the wall, her mind racing. She could try to fight. Her species had natural defenses, but she was too weak, and violence would only confirm their fears. She could surrender, but she'd heard stories about what happened to aliens in human detention centers. The drones moved closer, their weapons humming with charged energy. Nera closed her eyes, thinking of her lost world, of her family, of the brief moment of hope she'd felt when Marcus showed her kindness. Perhaps that one moment would have to be enough. A sudden commotion erupted from the street. "Wait. Stop." A familiar voice. Marcus pushed through the gathering crowd, ignoring the security forces trying to hold him back. "She's registered. She's under my protection." The drones hesitated, their targeting systems remaining fixed on Nera while they processed this new information. Marcus held up some kind of official-looking document, his breath coming in gasps as if he'd been running. "Check the database," he insisted. "Refugee claim filed last night. Pending status. I'm her designated sponsor." Long seconds passed as the drones verified his claim. Nera hardly dared to breathe. Finally, the mechanical voice spoke again. "Verification confirmed. Stand down." The drones withdrew, though they remained hovering nearby. Marcus approached slowly, his hands visible. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I should have been faster with the paperwork. But it's done now. You're protected. Legally, at least." Nera stared at him, her translator struggling to process his words through her shock. "Why?" she managed to ask. "Why help me?" Marcus smiled sadly. "Because it's right. Because my grandparents were refugees once, and someone helped them. Because we're better than our fear." He held out his hand. "Come on. Let's get you somewhere safe, and then we can talk about what comes next." Naira looked at his offered hand, then at the watching crowd beyond. She saw fear there, yes, but also curiosity. A few faces showed something like shame, and one small child was still trying to wave at her, fascinated by her glowing skin, despite the mother's attempts to stop her. Slowly, cautiously, Naira took Marcus's hand. She didn't know what would come next, but for now, it was enough to know that not all hope was lost. Marcus's apartment was small but clean, located in an aging building on the outskirts of New Denver. Through the window, Naira watched the city's ever-present drones patrol the darkening sky, their sensors sweeping the streets below. She sat cross-legged on a worn couch, a borrowed blanket draped over her shoulders, while Marcus prepared something in his tiny kitchen. "It's not much," he called over his shoulder, "but it's safer than the streets. The building owner owes me a favor, so she won't ask questions." The smell of cooking food filled the apartment, something he'd called vegetable soup, modified to match her dietary requirements. Naira's translator hummed as she formed her response. "Why risk so much? Your job, your safety, all for someone not of your world." Her bioluminescent patterns shifted with curiosity, casting gentle purple light across the room's walls. Marcus was quiet for a moment, stirring the pot thoughtfully. "You know, 6 years ago, when the Krath first attacked Earth, I lost my sister in the Chicago incident." He spoke softly, but each word carried weight. "Everyone expected me to hate all aliens after that. Many people did. But hatred." He shook his head. "Hatred just makes us more like them." A knock at the door made them both freeze. Marcus moved silently to the security panel, checking the camera feed. His shoulders relaxed slightly. "It's okay," he said. "A friend." The door opened to reveal a middle-aged woman with graying hair and kind eyes. She carried a large bag and wore a medical insignia on her jacket. "Dr. Rivera," Marcus greeted her. "Thank you for coming." The doctor's eyes widened slightly at the sight of Naira, but showed no fear. "When you said you had someone who needed discreet medical attention, I assumed." She shook her head, smiling. "Well, this is certainly more interesting than my usual house calls." Naira watched warily as the doctor approached, her instruments looking both familiar and alien. "May I?" Dr. Rivera asked, waiting for Naira's nod before beginning her examination. The doctor's hands were gentle as she checked the wound on Naira's side from the earlier shooting. "Remarkable healing capacity," Dr. Rivera murmured. "But you're still severely malnourished. Your body structure is fascinating. Similar to our basic protein arrangements, but with significant differences in cellular energy processing." She reached into her bag, pulling out several vials. "I've been studying xenobiology since first contact. These supplements should help." As the doctor worked, Marcus served the soup he prepared. The warmth spread through Naira's body, and she felt her strength slowly returning. Dr. Rivera continued her examination, asking careful questions about Naira's physiological needs and taking detailed notes. "The wound will heal completely with proper nutrition," the doctor finally concluded. "But there's something else you should know." She hesitated, glancing at Marcus. I'm part of a network, medical professionals who help refugee aliens off the official channels. There are more like you, Nira, more who need help. Nira's luminescence pulsed with surprise. Others? Here. Dr. Rivera nodded. Hidden. Scared. The government's official stance is deportation or detention. But some of us, she straightened her shoulders, some of us remember our own history. How many times humans have turned away those in need, only to regret it later. Marcus sat forward, his expression intense. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, Dr. Rivera said carefully, that Nira might be able to help us help others. Her knowledge of her own biology, her understanding of non-human needs, it could save lives. She turned to Nira. Only if you're willing, of course. It would mean staying hidden, careful. 3 months had passed since Nira first stumbled into Marcus's life. The hidden clinic beneath Dr. Rivera's osteopathy practice had become a sanctuary for displaced aliens, with Nira working tirelessly to help those who arrived scared and hungry, just as she had been. Tonight, she moved quietly through the underground space, checking on their latest arrivals. A young centaurian with crystalline skin slept peacefully, their fractured surface slowly healing. Beside them, a Meridian mother cradled her child, both of their atmospheric shells humming softly in the dim light. Their vitals are stabilizing, Nira whispered to Marcus, who stood guard near the entrance. Her translator had improved, allowing for more nuanced communication. The supplements Dr. Rivera synthesized are working. Marcus nodded, but his expression remained tense. Security sweeps are increasing. They're using new scanning technology. We can't keep this hidden forever. Before Nira could respond, the clinic's warning system pulsed red. Dr. Rivera's voice crackled through the comm. Security drones approaching. Multiple units. They know. Nira's bioluminescence flickered with alarm, but her voice remained steady. Begin evacuation protocol. She turned to the room's occupants, many of whom were already stirring in panic. Remember your routes. Stay calm. Help those who cannot move quickly. The hidden exits they prepared began to open, refugees moving silently through underground passages that connected to the city's old maintenance tunnels. Marcus coordinated the evacuation while Nira helped the Meridian mother secure her child's atmospheric shell for travel. The sound of boots on the floor above grew louder. Time was running out. Nira, you need to go, Marcus urged, touching her arm. Take Tunnel 3. I'll hold them off. No, Nira's patterns pulsed with determination. I will not run again. Not from this. She straightened to her full height, her natural glow strengthening. Get them to safety. I have an idea. Before Marcus could protest, Nira moved to the clinic's main area. She could hear the security forces preparing to breach the upper level. Her fingers danced over the medical equipment, making quick adjustments. The door burst open. Security forces poured in, weapons raised, but they stopped short at what they found. Nira stood calmly in the center of the room, surrounded by active medical equipment. Holographic displays showed vital signs, chemical analyses, and biological data. And projected on the wall behind her was a complete breakdown of the Krath virus that had devastated 3 human cities last year. I am Nira of the Luminary, she announced, her voice clear and unwavering. My people were healers before the Krath destroyed our world. We understood biological systems that your science is only beginning to explore. She gestured to the projections, including how to cure the bioweapons the Krath left behind. The security team's commander stepped forward, weapon still raised but uncertainty clear in his stance. Why should we believe you? Because I could have left, Nira said simply. I could have hidden. Instead, I choose to stay, to help, as others helped me when I was starving and alone. Her patterns rippled with gentle light. Your people fear us because of what the Krath did, but not all who come from the stars bring destruction. She touched a control, and more data filled the screens. This is everything my people knew about Krath biotechnology. Everything we learned fighting them before they reached Earth. It's yours. In exchange, I ask only that you look at those you call refugees and see not threats, but people. People who might have knowledge, skills, hope to share, if you let them." The commander lowered his weapon slowly, staring at the data scrolling across the screens. His hand went to his comm unit. "Central, we're going to need scientific teams down here. And medical personnel." He looked at Nira. "This is real." "Every bit," Dr. Rivera said, emerging from her office with a stack of data tablets. "We've been verifying and testing her knowledge for months. The applications go far beyond just the Krath weapons. Her understanding of xenobiology could revolutionize human medicine." The commander was silent for a long moment, then spoke into his comm again. "Central, revised situation assessment. This is no longer a raid. We're listing this as a first contact scenario. A peaceful one." Naira's patterns rippled with relief as she felt Marcus's presence behind her, solid and supportive as always. She had gambled everything on this moment, on the hope that fear could be overcome with understanding. That light could indeed shine brightest in darkness. The next hours were a blur of activity. Scientific teams arrived, their initial suspicion giving way to excitement as they began to grasp the implications of Nira's knowledge. The other refugees were allowed to return, no longer prisoners but potential colleagues in humanity's growing understanding of the galaxy. As dawn broke over New Denver, Nira stood at the clinic's window, watching the city awaken. Marcus joined her, his hand finding hers in the growing light. "You took a huge risk," he said softly. "It could have gone very differently." Naira's patterns pulsed gently. "You took a risk too, that first night. Sometimes that's what hope requires." She turned to him, her luminescence bright with emotion. "My people have another saying. In the darkest night, we learn who carries light." Marcus smiled, understanding. Together, they watched the sun rise on a new day, knowing that somewhere in the city, other refugees were watching too, waiting, hoping, and perhaps finally beginning to feel at home. 6 months after the clinic incident, New Denver had changed. The old food bank where Marcus once worked had been transformed into the city's first official alien refugee assistance center, with Nira serving as chief medical advisor. The building's walls, once stark and institutional, now shimmered with bioluminescent murals created by grateful luminary artists. Today, Nira stood before the center's main entrance, her patterns glowing steadily as she prepared to welcome another group of refugees. These weren't arriving in secret or hiding in shadows. They came openly, under the protection of new laws that recognize the value of interstellar cooperation. "The adaptation protocols are ready," she told Marcus, who now coordinated the center's food distribution program. "Each new arrival will receive customized nutrition packages based on their biological needs." She paused, watching a young human child wave excitedly at a passing meridian. "It's still strange, sometimes, being seen, being known." Marcus smiled, remembering the frightened figure he'd found behind the food bank all those months ago. "Strange good or strange bad?" "Strange good," Nira assured him, her patterns rippling with amusement. "Though I miss our midnight soup conversations sometimes." Their discussion was interrupted by Dr. Rivera, hurrying over with a tablet in hand. "The results are in from the latest trials," she announced, eyes bright with excitement. "The modified luminary healing techniques are showing incredible promise. The hospital board has approved full implementation." Nira's glow brightened at the news. What had begun as a desperate gamble, sharing her people's medical knowledge, had blossomed into a revolutionary advancement in human healthcare. Hospitals across the globe were now adopting techniques that blended Earth medicine with the biological understanding of various alien species. But more important than the medical breakthroughs was the change in attitudes. Fear had given way to curiosity, suspicion to cooperation. The security drones still patrolled overhead, but now they were as likely to be helping lost alien visitors as searching for them. A commotion at the entrance drew their attention. A new group of refugees had arrived, a mixed bunch of species, some familiar, some new to Earth. Among them stood a luminary family, their patterns dim with exhaustion but alive with hope. Neera moved forward to greet them, her translator humming. "Welcome to Earth," she said in their native language, her patterns synchronizing with theirs in the traditional greeting. "You are safe here." The family's youngest member, barely more than a child, stared at her in wonder. "You glow so brightly," they said, "like the stories of home, before the darkness came." Neera knelt to the child's level. "The darkness does not last forever," she told them gently. "Here, we learn to create our own light." She gestured to the humans and aliens working together throughout the center. "And when many lights shine together, they create something new, something stronger." As if to emphasize her words, the center's newly installed atmospheric processors hummed to life, adjusting the environment to accommodate the various species present. The technology, a collaboration between human engineers and alien scientists, was another symbol of what could be achieved through cooperation. Marcus watched Neera guide the new arrivals through their orientation, his heart full. He thought back to that first night, to the simple choice to offer food to a starving stranger. He couldn't have known then how that one act of kindness would ripple outward, transforming not just two lives, but an entire city's understanding of what was possible. Dr. Rivera joined him, following his gaze. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "when I first started helping alien refugees, I thought we were just saving lives. I never imagined we were helping build a future." "That's the thing about light," Marcus replied, remembering Neera's words from months ago. "You never know how far it will spread once you let it shine." Outside, the sun set over New Denver, its rays catching the bioluminescent murals and sending waves of color across the center's walls. Inside, aliens and humans moved together in a dance of cooperation, each bringing their own light to the growing brightness of understanding. And in the midst of it all, Neera's patterns pulsed with joy, knowing that somewhere in the city, another refugee was finding their way through the darkness. But now, they wouldn't have to face it alone. Now, there would always be a light to guide them home.